functional and used on a daily basis probably anywhere in the world. Is that correct?
No, correct.
The lab that I worked in was originally created by Namjoon Paik, and here we see an example of the Paik video synthesizer. So one thing I sort of want to make really clear, just in terms of a medium, she happens to be sitting down at a console, but you notice the tools that are spread throughout the room. Well, those would all be interconnected together, and if I were working in a studio like that, I wouldn't be sitting at a chair looking at my screen like this. I would be moving throughout the room, adjusting all the flows of feedback and signals. So if anything, this art form is really about sculpting in real time the signal, and multiple signals often. The beauty of what we're doing now, of course, is the fact that it is contained within a computer, and it's probably not an exaggeration to say that the power within this laptop equals about 25 of these rooms or more easily. So moving along. So one thread in this art really is the history of video, and that history, of course, spreads into electronic music, and it spreads into earlier modernist movements in the arts, from futurism through Dadaism, constructivism. We can look at a whole lot of different things, which we don't have time to do this evening. But I also wanted to talk about visual music, because there are a number of practitioners who avidly consider themselves visual music practitioners today, and it's an important part of the thread of what Corey and I are doing, although I find that oftentimes within this milieu there's a kind of a limited concept of what visual music might be. In essence, the idea is that there could be a visual language that is analogous to, and it's often very Eurocentric, analogous to the Western theory of music, and that we could indeed assign sort of harmonic relationships to color and play a composition that's visual that would have perhaps the same power as an auditory piece of music. I find this to be a very interesting idea in terms of transcoding. I'm going to use that word once again, turning one kind of information stream into another kind of information stream. But a lot of the argument within this community comes down to how things are mapped. The idea that there is an absolute mapping. Some people hold to this idea. I don't think either Corey or I at all hold to the idea. As a matter of fact, it is the freedom of mapping things completely differently every time that's quite amazing for us. So that there is, if you've read some of this here, it talks about the dream of creating visual music comparable to auditory music found in the fulfillment in animated abstract films by artists such as Oscar Fischinger, Len Lye, and Norman McLaren. I would also mention the Whitney brothers. John Whitney's book, Digital Harmony, specifically deals with this kind of search for a harmonic theory that can be applied to moving or kinetic visual images. I have to mention one of my mentors, Bill Moritz. He's no longer on the planet, but he wrote extensively on the topic and was one of the world's foremost experts on visual music. And so I just consider this another thread that informs our work, because the work is auditory and it is visual. Now I'm going to move forward. We can talk about interactive media. Specifically, these ideas come from Lev Manovich, who happens to be one of the leading theorists at the moment in terms of formulating what is the practice, or what is really the medium of interactivity. And these are some things that are utilized and explored in our work. So 5 modalities he talks about here: numerical representation, which allows for an integral universality between media types. So one media can become another modularity, the idea that you can build up structures and recombine them in all sorts of ways, and this can also lead us into the actual grammar or language of the media itself in terms of, we think of a traditional film, we think of a film instead of it being edited in a sort of a specific way and played over and over again infinitely, always the same. If it's more modular in the form of a database, it can be recombined and shuffled and re-edited every time we see it. Another idea is automation. I've sort of linked it to autonomous behavior, and that's through very complex automation, but many elements of the media stream can be automated in all kinds of ways. It does not necessarily take a human being to assemble or process it manually, like you might have done with, say, a comic book or a film script. Variability, and I linked that idea to a very important development, which was Cage's sense of indeterminacy. It's become very clear at this point in the 21st century that Cage's ideas about indeterminate forms where the artist removes themselves, at least in part, from the process, are at the very core center of a lot of generative kinds of works. And clearly digital art has mined this idea extremely well. And then back to the word transcoding. In the case of the work that Corey and I do, it's sound into image and image into sound, that it actually can be and will be in future works any number of kinds of information or data streams that can be turned into a visual representation, a sonic representation, a sculptural representation, which we saw some evidence of in Christina's
and just to elaborate a little past image includes, in this case, all kinds of behaviors from motion and relationships between visual objects to the actual physical forms. And so it's not just tied to a physical form or like a color or a luminance kind of decision. It can be tied to any sort of behavioral parameter that might exist in a visual world. So it can be anything from positions to movements to decay and all of those kinds of things can be transcoded as well.
And we'll, at the very end of this talk, just sort of look back over a number of keywords and concepts that we've been using. But one of them, the idea of behavior, is sort of central. It's something we talk about constantly in the work. And that is probably something that's relatively new. Well, I think in my old work as a choreographer, I would talk about that kind of thing quite a lot because I would be working with autonomous agents, the dancers. But as a painter, you would less likely be talking about the behavior. Sometimes you talk about the behavior of the medium, but Corey and I are constantly talking about what we do in terms of it being alive. Yeah. So what we're going to look at here, looks a little chunky, is a prototype exhibition. It's called, the overall project is called the Hot House Project, and Corey worked very closely on this project with me prior to us sort of formalizing our collaboration. And the central piece here, the 100 Monkey Garden, is a synthetic ecology of basic food.
So introduce yourself before too long.
Yeah. That's the new version of that button. I'm David Stout, and
I'm Corey Metcalf.
Corey. I am a professor at the College of Santa Fe. I teach in the Department of Moving Image Arts, which many people know as the film department. But my area of interest really has been for a long while cross-disciplinary kinds of work, primarily within the arts, but now moving out into science. And many of you here at the complex, I'm actually on the board of the